Just so you know what's going on here today, my name is Chris Pitts, and I am the current president of the Waban Area Council and the producer of these debates, going on 14 years, I think, now, with Marjorie has done every one of them. And so the four councils of Waban, Upper Falls, Highlands, and Newtonville have been bringing these debates for contested offices. And the past debates can actually be seen on YouTube. It's kind of interesting to see over the years. Each area council is made up of 9 unpaid elected representatives. You can vote for area council candidates on a separate ballot on November and at the City Hall during early voting from October 28th, I think, to November 1st. We received a lot of questions from our survey, and we worked many of those into the questions you're going to hear today and tomorrow. And the final list of questions was not shared with anyone. In fact, the final list questions are by the moderator only. So there's 2 ways to look at that. One is if these candidates know what's going on, they could probably write these questions themselves, and they've had a chance to answer many of them on the way to this stage. So, but there may be some surprises here and there. Probably not, but we'll get a chance to hear from them and what makes them different. And anyways, let me tell you about Marjorie Arons-Barron, who was the editorial director at WCVB-TV Channel 5, Boston, for 20-some years, and produced many of the station's political and candidate forums. She has 3 Emmys and 5 times National Award for Excellence in Television Editorials from the National Broadcast Editorial Association. In 2019, she was inducted to the Mass Broadcasters Hall of Fame, and that's pretty special. You have your own blog, MarjorieArons.Barron.com. Okay, so the format was really created to apportion time fairly, but we want this to be conversational if you can, but the moderator will be actively engaged in moving the discussion along and will alternate who's first to answer each question. Point is, we want to find out who these candidates are, what they're going to do in office, and what makes them different. Here are the rules for the debate. Answer in general should be under 45 seconds, but the moderator may change that. Rebuttals will be limited to 30 seconds. Again, a moderator may change that. Candidates may make closing statements of 30 to 45 seconds. So with that, why don't we get started?
Thanks, Chris. It's great to be back in the moderator's seat. The goal today is vigorous debate and civil dialogue. You can count on me to press for follow-up information and cut off filibustering. We're all here today because of our love for the city and its well-being. Marc Laredo grew up in Newton, attended Newton Public Schools, got his undergraduate degree at Cornell and his law degree at the University of Pennsylvania. He worked as an assistant attorney general in the Mass AG's office and is a practicing attorney at the law firm Laredo, Smith & Kane, which he co-founded. He served 8 years on the school committee, including as its chair, and 14 years on the city council, serving 2 terms as president. Cecchinelli Jr. is Albert Cecchinelli Jr. is a lifelong resident of Newton and also a graduate of Newton schools. After high school, he attended Johnson & Wales University, then earned a Juris Doctorate from the New England Law School in Boston and is currently a practicing attorney. He's involved in local nonprofits such as the Sons of the American Legion and the Newton Taxpayers Association. At one time, he served on the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Commission. He also worked as a professional chef and posts on social media about food, my favorite issue. So now on to the serious public policy issues. In preparation for these debates, the 4 city councils did a public opinion survey. Not surprisingly, respondents' top concern is how is the city run and how that affects them. Newton has a strong mayor form of government, and both of you want to take that on, but there's a growing sentiment that the city council should have greater powers. For example, in more robust participation in shaping the city budget. Let's start with you, Marc. As outgoing president of the city council, would you favor giving up some of the mayoral role in shaping the budget and shifting it to the city council?
You know, I'm certainly open always to giving some thought to those issues. There's a balance there. It's one thing to say generally I support that. It's another thing to look at specifics. For example, I do support the city council having money to hire an independent attorney, for example. I think that's useful. I think that's important. The city council also has authority over the city clerk, and we need to make sure that that authority is there, properly funded. Financially, I'm open to it. I'd really want to think very carefully about the details before I commit to anything.
Al, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm against it. I think that part of the job of the mayor is to be a financial steward for the city. I believe that too many chefs ruin the sauce. So I would be against that.
All right, let's talk about the city budget, what's in it and how to pay for it. The annual budget for the city is well over $623 million. 83% of that budget comes from property taxes, and many residents are financially strapped or facing a period of financial uncertainty. Moody's has given Newton a AAA rating, but has pointed to storm clouds ahead. We've lost COVID relief funds, federal ARPA funds, and more cuts are anticipated. So, to what extent are there opportunities for cutting services, or are there reallocations that you might suggest? Al, and then Marc.
Well, I think that we need to get away from residential development and try to get some commercial development into the city. I know that's not an overnight cure, but the commercial property tax rate is higher and they use less services.
Well, we're going to get into commercial development,
Okay.
but I
All
want to
right.
look at what is currently in the budget and whether you can make cuts that you would recommend or reallocate any money.
Well, I think that we should have one purchasing department in the city. We should have one HR department in the city. Right off the bat, there's two cuts that we could make. I think we need to be on an austerity budget right now because most of our citizens are on an austerity budget. I think that we need to look at our contracts, and as mayor, I would be working for the citizens of Newton, not for the unions.
Marc?
So look, when I come into office, we're going to look at every single department carefully. That's a job you do regularly. You should be doing it repeatedly. There's two ways in particular that we can try to improve our city's financial situation without cutting services. One is to make far better use of technology. When I've been talking to department heads at City Hall, for example, it's clear that we're still doing things on paper, for example, that should be automated. That's beneficial for the residents, that's beneficial for us. I also think that we're going to see AI take a very significant role in how we deliver services going forward. That's an area we need to be very careful of, but we should not be afraid of.
Now, Al mentioned contracts with city employees. Would you see opportunities for reshaping those contracts at all?
Look, I think it's really important when you have existing contracts with your unions that you honor them. You negotiate them fairly, you keep them. Negotiations are hard. We'll do our best job in negotiations, understanding that our unions have legitimate needs, our workers have legitimate needs, and we have finite finances. But the key there is to have fair, open, transparent negotiations with your unions and recognize that our city employees are really good at what they do. And I'm a firm believer that you support and value your workforce, and then you get a better workforce that better serves the residents.
Another contract that I wonder if you are interested in looking at, and that has to do with no-bid consultant contracts. Let's start with you, Al. What specific steps would you take to make such consultant contracts more efficient and transparent?
Well, I would get rid of the no bid. Every service that the city needs should be bid on, and though lowest price isn't always what we're looking at, we want to take that into consideration. We need to find who's going to provide the best services at the best price.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, if you're looking at a bid situation, you are looking at the lowest bid. That's how you have to evaluate it. So do I think as a general no bid contracts are good? The answer is no. You always should be having competition. There are occasions, for example, procuring legal services on an emergency basis, for example, where you need to go to someone you trust. You need to make sure the prices are fair. You got to scrutinize those bills that you get, just like they'd be a bill to you personally. But at the same time, just putting it out for a bid process sometimes doesn't get you the best person for the job.
So we've been looking at finding savings in existing line items. President Trump seems to be targeting cuts for certain so-called welcoming cities, and Newton is hospitable to immigrants. Would you support keeping Newton's welcoming city ordinance if it means losing the roughly $11 million it gets directly from the feds? We'll start with Marc.
The short answer is yes. We have a moral obligation in this city to do what's right. Our city council very clearly passed an ordinance that says we're a welcoming city. I think it's fair. I think it's reasonable. We are going to obey the law. I want to be very clear about that. But there are principles involved here. And as your leader, it's important that I stand up for principles.
Al, where do you stand on that?
Well, I think first we have to examine the question. You asked about immigrants. I love immigrants. I think immigrants are great. They've helped this country grow. Welcoming cities that allow for illegal aliens to be here should lose that funding, and I'm against having us remain a sanctuary city if that's what that means. I think that we need to follow federal law. The Supremacy Clause says that federal law supersedes local, state, all of those. So if federal law says that illegal aliens need to be deported, we need to work with the federal government and keep that funding, because we need the funding.
Now, you said in a previous debate or interview that you think that Trump is doing a great job. Could you elaborate on that
Yes,
a little bit? We don't want to get sidetracked.
For 4 years, the Biden administration allowed unfettered, unvetted crossing of the border. Now we need to take extreme steps to combat that. Eventually, all are going to go. Right now, the worst of the worst are being rounded up, but if they find you here while they're doing that, they're going to deport you also.
Marc?
President Trump gave an awfully wonderful opportunity for people to self-deport. They get $1,000, they get a plane ticket home, and they have an opportunity to come back. If these people stay here, they don't get a chance to come back.
Thanks, Marc.
I'm a huge believer in democracy, okay? I'm a believer in democratic values. I'm a believer in the First Amendment. I'm a believer in freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of association. I am worried about what's going on in Washington, D.C. now. The idea that we're militarizing the National Guard to send it into cities like Chicago and Portland and maybe Boston, and hopefully not Newton, I think is fundamentally wrong. The fact that ICE agents wear masks when they come in and arrest people, in my mind, is like a totalitarian regime. That's wrong. It doesn't mean we're not going to obey the law. We are. And I stand firmly with our police and fire and other public safety organizations in obeying the law. But I also believe in democratic values. And we need to stand up in this city, in this country, for democratic values.
Thanks. The question.
Actually, could I?
All right, very quickly.
So how do you feel about the police car in Boston that was set on fire
right,
the
you know
other
what?
day?
Absolutely wrong to do that, Al.
Okay, so
Wait,
how about the riots in Seattle?
all right, wait. This is filibustering now because we want to get back to the strictly
Okay,
local.
but he said that he was against having additional enforcement in these areas.
That's not what I said, Al.
Okay, let's
You
not.
said you didn't want the federal
All right,
government
this is
to
not-
bring the National Guard
The
in.
question on everyone's mind is, will we soon face a Prop 2.5 override? Marc, you said that you would support a debt exclusion override for capital projects, but you would, what criteria would you use in determining whether we would need an operating budget override?
I've repeatedly said, Marjorie, there's three factors that I look at. One, you have to have a very clear improvement, whether it's on the school side, the city side, or both. That's number one. Number two, you've got to take into account the city's finances, the state of the economy locally, nationally, at the state level. You've got to factor that in. And third, the voters have to trust me and trust my team that we've managed the city wisely and that with any additional funds, we're going to use them properly and appropriately as promised.
Al, your thoughts? Do you differentiate between debt exclusion overrides and operating budget overrides?
Well, I think the big difference with the debt exclusion override and the general override is that the debt exclusion override is only for 30 years. The regular override is for a lifetime. But guess what? Looking out into the crowd, I think that a debt exclusion override, other than two of you that seem like you're a little younger, you can pick which two. That's a lifetime override. So there is no difference for me. They are both lifetime overrides. I'm only 60 years old, but 90 years old is when a debt exclusion override would go away. We, as a city, have to think about the less fortunate, the people that are struggling, the people that are just hanging on to stay in Newton. We talk about getting low-income housing into Newton. We talk about a diversity of residents.
The timekeeper.
Oh, I'm sorry.
May I respond to that for a moment?
Yes, quickly.
Look, we've built new fire stations with override money, debt exclusion override money. We are going to need a new police station. We've built schools with debt exclusion override money. Those are critical infrastructure improvements for our city. And I support our police, I support our fire folks, and I support our students and our teachers, and they need facilities that are appropriate for them. And that costs money, and we need to persuade the public that that's money well spent.
All right. You said that you acknowledged that there has to be a level of trust between the mayor and the people as to how far and when you can go in this matter. And what specifically would you do to rebuild trust that has been lost, perhaps, in recent years?
There's multiple things you do. One is you're completely clear and transparent about your finances, and you put your finances on a city website so that they're readily understandable to the average voter. That's number one. Number two, it's not an individual approach at City Hall. It's a team approach. And my team is going to be all over the city, meeting with people all over the city to explain what we do, to get feedback as to what's not working well, and to improve. That's how you build the trust, period.
Al?
I agree with the city finances being on the website in a form that's easy to read and understand. Currently, I think that the city website needs some work. It's hard to navigate. It's hard to find what you're looking for. So I would work on getting that more navigable and having more information on it. I would continue the mayor's newsletter. I think that's a wonderful thing that we could do to show transparency. And I would be out there. I would have one day a month where I would have open office hours where people could just come in and speak with me. They'd have to sign up and, because there'd be a list of, people. But I would be accessible to the average person. I'm out there every day in the community, working currently. I have a good relationship with the citizens of Newton. And I think that would show through with my love of the city.
Well, good luck to whoever wins in getting that website fixed. Some 65% of the budget relates to the schools, and the schools are widely understood to have a structural deficit. How would that factor into your decision to move to an operating budget override?
You want me to go first, Marjorie?
Sure.
So look, that's going to be a critical factor. It is highly likely, if we have any kind of operating override at all, that a portion of that's going to go to the schools. The schools are the most important issue for me, and there's good reason for that. The 65% of the money that we spend, and that's our main job as a city, is to educate our kids. Like Al, I'm a product of the Newton Public Schools. All three of my kids went through the Newton Public Schools, and I served on the school committee for 8 years. So I know our schools really well. That's where we need to spend the money. We're going to be smart about it. We're going to be thoughtful about how we spend money in the system. But the needs of kids today are very different than when I went to school some 30, 40 years ago. And we have to acknowledge that as well. And our teachers understand that.
So, Al, this school structural deficit, would that incline you any more readily to an operating override?
No. I think that education is the most important part of my job. Education first. When I graduated Newton North High School, we were the 5th in the nation. Now we're 10th in our state. We need to do something to change that. I think Dr. Nolan is a step in the right direction, but we need to reorganize. We need to stop spending money on pilot programs like the Washington Street. That money could have went to the school budget. The bump outs in the roads that we're adding, all money that is misspent.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about where other monies could be found to go toward the schools. We've been on a very conservative schedule for fully funding the OPEB benefits, that other post-employment benefits, and have scheduled a date for full actuarial funding 10 years in advance of what the state mandates. To what extent should we ease up on that as a way of freeing certain dollars for the schools?
So, do you want me to go?
Sure.
So look, whether we like it or not, the retirement board controls the schedule of funding the pension liability. City literally has no say over that under state law. With that said, we have a couple opportunities there. One is to try to negotiate with the retirement board to extend the schedule, but that's also likely to mean that there's going to be some cost involved. The other thing that I think is certainly worth exploring is having a pension obligation bond where we bond the money now, but we pay it off instead of over 5 years, over, say, 10 years. I want to be very careful about that because that has a lot of implications, but it's certainly something we ought to be thinking through. That is a factor that squeezes us.
How about you?
Well, I think that we should look at other avenues of raising money in the city. We've got 2 beautiful stadiums at both of the high schools. What about naming rights? We have people that live in this city that own huge corporations, multinational, businessmen. Why not see if we can get some naming rights to those? We could also do it with the gymnasiums. We could do it all over the city. It's a wonderful opportunity to think out of the box and get some money into the city.
Are you up to going after some of the wealthier people for selling naming rights?
Naming rights sounds great, but it's not a solution. Let's be really blunt about it, okay? First of all, if you sell a naming right, it's one-time funds. It's not a continuing source of money, unlike, passing an operating override, for example. Second, you got a real issue when you have public buildings and you have corporations and individuals paying to have their names placed on those buildings. I think there's cause for concern about that. But the bottom line is it's just not going to be effective. It's not going to bring you the kind of money, nearly the kind of money that you need. Should we get more money from private donors to help supplement school and city spending? Absolutely. We should be much more aggressive of using our donor base, of creating alumni networks, but that's not going to be the solution here. And I frankly think it's not fair to the public to say that's going to be the solution.
Okay, so over the years, candidates have talked about getting more money from local nonprofit institutions, so-called pilots or payment in lieu of taxes. Very briefly, are there meaningful opportunities for that, or is this destined to continue just to be so much talk? Al first.
Well, I think that we first need to heal the rift between Boston College and the city. I think that once that's done, we may have an opportunity to get money in a pilot program from them. I think that the pilot program would be good if it was implemented properly, but right now it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. I am all in favor, though, of going after that.
So look, again, I think it's wonderful to try to increase the pilot payments. It's a laudable goal. Probably going to be much more successful by talking to our universities in the city and exploring opportunities that are mutually beneficial for them. For example, Lynch School of Education at BC has teachers and trains teachers, and we could have partnerships. We do already that we have student teachers, but more partnerships. Those are beneficial to our students. Those are beneficial to teachers. That's beneficial to the school. So I've met with some of the educational leaders. I'll continue to meet with more of them, and that's critically important that you forge those relationships. But pilots are the type of thing you talk about a lot in a campaign trail and are far easier to talk about in a campaign trail than actually implement.
As history has proven. Also, let's expand this whole notion of seeking new revenue. Let's talk about commercial development. Moody's has noted that we're already built out. Marc, the Chamber of Commerce has described you as growth resistant. You have said that there are, quote, a lot of opportunities for development in the city. Would you please name some specific sites for such development?
Look, there are sites all along Needham Street, for example. We have some more newer properties. We have others that are older. There are sites along Washington Street. We are going to see developments in our village centers. There's certainly some sites in Auburndale where you may have older commercial buildings and they could be replaced by newer ones. We're going to have a very different approach in my administration to economic development, and I've been extremely clear about it. We are going to be proactive. That means by starting to go out and talk to the local business owners, talk to the local landlords. What do they need from the city to improve? And then we're going to be proactive about going elsewhere in the Commonwealth, going elsewhere in the state, and going even internationally to market Newton as an attractive place. I'm also setting up an arts and culture department because I view arts and culture as an engine for economic development in the city, and that's part of the reason we're doing that. So I have some very clear, very pro-growth plans to do that, and we'll do it responsibly.
Al, where would you build and what would you build?
Well, I would try to build commercial property. We've had too much of an emphasis on residential units in the past 12 years, and we've lost a lot of great opportunities. Grove Street would have been a great opportunity. In Nonantum, behind Watertown Street, there's a beautiful old mill area that is underutilized. That would be a great spot to put labs. I know that there used to be a lot of commercial stuff going on there, but we could really put one of those beautiful labs that they just built in Watertown on Galen Street. That could have come to Newton easily. Another thing I would do is we would make it easier for commercial development as opposed to making it hard. We want to welcome these people. We want to attract them. We lost Travelocity to Needham. We need to get people to come to Newton because it's easy to work with us as opposed to leave Newton because it's hard.
Okay, so what specifically would you do then to be more hospitable toward commercial developers?
We would say, if you come to our city, here's the plan. We would have a plan that would make it easier to get through all of the hoops of building.
Marc, your thoughts on that?
Look, it's great to talk about generalities, okay, but I've got really specific ideas. I am going to have an economic development team that physically goes out there with me to talk to our local businesses, talk to our local landlords, come up with a clear marketing plan to make Newton attractive. That can be by video, it can be by website. There's a lot of creative ways to do that. And it's not something that's done overnight, and it's not done with just a statement, I want more business here. Because, for example, lab space, I'd love to have lab space. I've talked to real estate developers. They're not developing lab space right now because it's not economically feasible.
Well, what about Riverside? We're on Riverside 4.0 right now. What is the potential there, and what should the city's role be?
You know, I can't talk about Riverside. As you know, it's a pending land use project. I sit on the land use committee. We're sitting in a quasi-judicial capacity. I will tell you that I am thinking that issue, the Riverside, through very carefully. You also have to understand it's not just what I may want, but it's what a developer is going to be able to get the financing to build. As much as I would love to see lots of office space built in this city, no developer right now is building office space.
So Al mentioned making the process simple, and we hear this broad language about simplifying permitting process. What specifically could you change in the permitting process that would speed the process up?
Look, when I became chair of the land use committee, one of the things I did initially was to sit down with our planning department and trace the steps it took from when you showed up at City Hall to when you got approved. And we talked about what can be done to make that quicker. We're not doing nearly as well in that area as we could. As the mayor, I will be working with our planning department. So instead of 3 weeks to get something done, it gets done in a week. And if you do that, all through the process, you speed it up much quicker. It sounds small, it sounds incremental, but it actually makes a huge difference. And we are going to have a customer service mentality at City Hall, which means when people call us for something, like opening up that coffee shop, there's going to be somebody at City Hall who walks them through the process so they can get it done quickly. And if we have a rule that doesn't make any sense, we'll get rid of it.
All right, now you mentioned coffee shops. What should the mayor specifically be doing to help small businesses? Forget about the developers for a minute. Small businesses. Al, do you want to go first?
Well, I think we need to promote our city to get these people in. We have a lot of empty storefronts, none in Nonantum right now, but in other areas. We have to think about what we can do to make it better for the small business, to make them want to come here. And I think
Well, have you been thinking about this?
Yeah.
So what specifically can the mayor do?
Like I said, the mayor can promote getting these businesses into the city, and they can do it by making the city's village centers more vibrant, not by tearing down the existing buildings and building more. That's going to make the businesses there less desirable, less active, because when you bring in construction, it throws off the parking, it throws off the traffic patterns, and these current businesses that are there are going to have to leave, and then when the new building is built, it's going to be more expensive.
The clock has ticked.
Yeah.
Marc, what about small businesses?
So look, it starts off with the basics. You start by talking to the people who are actually there now. I've been doing that. I've met with the restaurant owners, for example, on a couple of occasions in the city, talking about what they really need. It's very basic stuff. It's making sure they have attractive benches in front of their establishments. It makes sure there's good trash pickup there. It makes sure there's good lighting. It means making sure that the sidewalks are clean and safe and passable, both in summer and winter. It means making outdoor dining easier for our businesses rather than harder. The city encouraged outdoor dining at one point and then made it harder by making the individual businesses pay for moving those pavers that block the outdoor area. That to me is completely counterproductive. It means bringing people together in a village center so they can act collaboratively. And there's a lot of steps you can take.
Okay. Now, we've talked about the powerful impact of the schools on the city's overall budget. Another challenge facing the mayor comes in his role on the school committee, and that's how to preserve academic excellence and at the same time serve all levels of individual needs and potential for development. So, Al, let's start with you. How would you balance the two? What can the mayor on the school committee do to meet these two sometimes conflicting goals?
Well, the mayor would be the ninth member of the school committee. So I believe that going to all of the meetings would be important as the ninth member of the school committee. I believe that working to get a coalition of other school committee members together to help push those goals forward would be very important. We would need to live within our budget, and by living within our budget, some cuts would have to be made. That would probably be cuts to staff and administration. But, you know, we've had a declining enrollment over the years, and you know, if we're not going to try to get those students back, we need to lower our staffing so that it's in the right area.
Marc, this really goes to the whole controversy in the community over cutting back on certain advanced placement courses, and there are different constituents for different parts of the school budget. How do you balance those?
Look, number one, you know, the school committee's job is really to hire and fire the superintendent, oversee the budget, and make some general policy decisions. It's not there to set curriculum. With that said, number one, I really like Dr. Nolan a lot, and I've been working with Dr. Nolan now to get ready for the future, including on the budget issues. Here's my view of schooling. Schools start with academics. I believe in academic rigor. I think it's appropriate. I think you want your kids to be challenged. There's a caveat. You do not want to create an environment where kids are overstressed out. And we've seen that in the past when we've had kids overloaded with work and they have very serious mental health issues, or at least some of them do. So it's a balance. You need rigor, but you also need balance. I'm a huge believer in extracurricular activities because I think they promote a lot for our schools. And every single kid in the school building needs to feel safe and secure every single day.
Okay, so are there lessons that you took away from the 11-day teacher strike last year? Marc, we'll start.
Sure, I took away 3 lessons because during the strike, I spent a lot of time going out and talking to parents, particularly at the elementary school level. I led the city council in making some very strong statements, urging all parties to get together to end the strike. And by the way, I led and did a press conference with maybe 14 other city councilors right behind me. And that, to me, says a lot about my leadership style, that it's not me alone, but it's a team. 3 lessons, okay? Number one, you gotta have financial transparency upfront about what your real money needs are. 2, when the going gets tough, I think the mayor needs to get in the room. I've done lots and lots of negotiations in the school committee in my professional career. I'm not afraid to get in the room. I think it's important not only for the teachers to see that, public to see it. 3rd, and this is the hardest, the tone of communications, I think at times I would have changed. Frankly, that's much easier to say in hindsight than at the time, but I think that would have been beneficial.
Al, your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are, first, there was no teachers' strike. There was an illegal work stoppage. We should have forced the teachers back to work. The fines that they were given were released. I don't understand. There was so much damage to the children. I nanny for my niece and nephews through their school, and my niece, after 2 years of being out on COVID, that strike really hurt her emotionally and mentally. And, you know, the teachers say, oh, we care about the children. Why did they do that to the children? I feel that they should have been forced back and forced to the table.
How would you force them back?
Through the courts.
Okay.
Can I just respond?
Yeah, quickly.
You know, I think my opponent forgets that the city did go to court, did seek certain relief. That's up to the judge, and the judge issued certain orders, but did, you know, they were fines, nothing else. So you need to abide by the legal process. We talked earlier about obeying the law, and I think you follow the law, and you go to court, and the judge makes a decision, and you respect it.
Okay. The area council survey also reflected that top of mind is the challenge of keeping Newton affordable. So this applies to young people who grew up here, people who work for the city but can't afford to live here, and seniors who want to stay in the city but downsize. So, Al, you have been quoted as saying that Newton doesn't have a housing shortage, that the problem is affordability. But don't the laws of supply and demand suggest that creating more housing would lower the pressure on costs?
Actually, no, because they're not building housing that is lower income housing. They're building luxury units. We have to watch out because with the village, the VCOD, Village Center Overdevelopment Plan, there is no call for any low-income housing. That's going to keep us in the 40B forever. The problem is that 40B housing, the right now with our average median income, to be qualified for as a single person, you can make up to $90,000 a year. To me, that's not low-income housing. That's not bringing diversity of income into the city. $90,000 a year is what 80% of our AMI is. So we need to change that, and we need to get out of the 40B so that we can decide in our inclusionary zones what the ratio is and what the income level is.
Marc, how would you keep the city more affordable?
So look, this is an extraordinarily complicated question, and we're not going to solve it at the local level. Frankly, in Newton, we have limited ability to build more single-family housing. We just don't have the land for it, so we're not going to do it, and we need to be honest about it. Should we be providing more alternative types of housing in the city? We're increasing our supply of apartments, for example. I think that's good. That's something that we have needed for a long time. We certainly need to make sure we're working with the Newton Housing Trust, the Newton Housing Authority to develop opportunities for low-income housing in the city. I think that's critical. We also need to look at other things. If you look at True Life, for example, over in the JCC campus, they're opening up a new facility called Opus, which is going to have housing for older residents that were in kind of the missing middle, so to speak. Not only will that provide housing for those folks, but in turn, that frees up single-family housing in the city as they move there. So that's another vehicle. The other thing we need to do is...
I see the stop sign.
I'll stop. I'll get to my next point later.
Can I rebuttal that?
As part of your rebuttal,
Yeah.
and then we'll move to Marc on that, you've talked about changing the inclusionary zone percentage requirement in developments, and what is it, 15 or 20% now? How high would you do that, and can developers afford to set aside an even greater percentage for more moderately priced housing?
Well, if they can't do that, I would say then they need to find another town to develop in. I would like to see a 30% AMI for a certain amount of units in every building that's built in the inclusionary zone. I think it's possible. I think that it needs to be done if we want to do anything about getting low-income housing. I think that if we're serious about it, that's important. But I'd like to also state that the other day I went on Zillow. There are 500 housing units available right now in Newton. There are 2,300 being built. I don't think that we have a shortage of units.
Marc?
I don't think that we need to be in such a rush to build more units.
You know, I like to live in the real world, okay? And in the real world, you understand what the true financing ability is for something. If a developer can't get financing for something because the numbers don't work, and reputable developers whom you trust tell you that, and financial people whom you trust tell you that, you have to believe in it, because as a city, we're not going to be in the business of just developing housing all over the city. We may do it through the Newton Housing Authority and other places. I want to get back to what I was saying earlier about that the housing issue is not just local, but it's regional. I am determined to work with leaders from other cities and towns to improve our commuter rail. Because if we improve commuter rail, I mean really improve commuter rail, so that Springfield and Worcester become accessible, we are helping those cities and towns, and we're helping Newton, because you're making it more viable to build there, and you're making it viable for people to commute back and
Okay,
forth.
so that's a wonderful segue into a conversation about infrastructure priorities. What are your priorities for road management and replacement? Will we ever see the potholes filled on tertiary roads? Al, let's start with you.
Well, I think that from talking to people as I've been out there on the road, potholes are an important issue. It's probably the third most often thing I hear about. I think that we need to have a plan to fix them. But the thing that I'm most concerned about is the road diet that Newton is on. I think it's bad for the environment because it causes tie-ups.
What do you mean by road diet?
Where they're narrowing the roads,
Oh.
taking out lanes, and I think that we need to allow people that are going to drive to get from A to B in their car for the least amount of time that it can take. Right now, the road diet is making bottlenecks and congestion, and it's made to make people so frustrated that they leave their cars at home, and that's not an option in this city.
Mark?
So look, it's multifaceted, but there's things I'll do right up front. I really think the DPW department needs to be focused on really basics of rebuilding streets and sidewalks, not worrying so much about creating grand visions, particularly outside of village centers, but just getting the basic work done. Number two, residents have to have a very clear understanding as to when their streets and sidewalks are going to get done, and then we have to live by that commitment. If we tell you it's going to be 2 years, and we do it in a year and a half, we're heroes. If we tell you it's going to be 2 years and we do it in 4 years, we've done a bad job. That's critical, and we need to do a much better job in that area, frankly. There's no excuse for where we are now.
Well, you've led right into this question, and I have to ask you whether you support or oppose the referendum repealing the overnight parking ban. Let's start with you, Mark.
I don't favor the referendum. I think the overnight parking ban serves salutary purposes. We do have winters, despite the mild winters we've had in the last few years. We do have winters of heavy snow. I'm old enough to remember 10 years ago when we had 100 inches of snow in a year, and we had streets blocked for months as it was difficult to park. With that said, I've said repeatedly, I'll respect the will of the voters. The voters vote to lift the overnight parking ban. I'll abide by the wishes of the voters. We will, in certain areas of the city, need to come up with solutions, and I can tell you that the city council struggled with this for a long time and has not been able to come up with them yet, and that's another reason to favor keeping the overnight ban in place.
Al?
I am in favor of keeping the ban in place, especially without a plan. There are some areas that may be amenable to having overnight parking. We would need to put together a commission of residents that could go to areas that request to keep overnight parking available in the winter and assess them. And there would need to be a permitting process so that you would get a window sticker that you could, overnight park in that neighborhood because you're a part of that neighborhood. But I think that allowing for the overnight parking ban to be lifted would encourage developers to have less parking in their developments, which would just make more money for those developers. It's also a safety issue, and I see the stop sign.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
Another aspect of infrastructure basically has to do with flooding problems. And climate change has led to local flooding in several Newton neighborhoods. What will the city do to help out local homeowners who face peril as the situation worsens? Let's see. Al, let's start with you. And then we'll go back to
Well,
Mark.
I think that maybe the city could do a tax rebate for people installing pumps into their basement, sump pumps, things like that. with not a complete rebate, but a partial rebate off of their property taxes. We'd have to have these areas set aside and offer these people the opportunity to have the help.
Mark?
Yeah, some pumps are not the answer. Some pumps means that you have a problem and it's getting in your basement and you now have to pay a boatload of money to fix it. So the real problem is what you do with stormwater before it gets in your basement. So part of that is we are working on, but we need a lot more work to do on our stormwater systems in the city. That includes catch basins in the city to make sure they're cleaned out regularly and frequently. It makes sure that in our open spaces at Edmonds Park, a Cold Spring Park, we're maintaining them as open spaces because those are natural places for groundwater to go. And it means making sure that we have areas in low-lying areas that are really having frequent problems. We deal with that. It means making sure that in our zoning code, we don't let builders build and create worse problems for their neighbors. And those are very concrete steps that we will take.
What about allowing homeowners with severe problems to hook back up to the city drainage system? Al?
I think that if they're willing to pay the costs, I think that we should consider it.
Mark?
I'm certainly open to that, particularly in areas where things are already built. I would feel very differently in certain instances if someone was building brand new and said, I want to build in the stormwater system. There, I think you can say, no, you need to figure out another solution. But if you're an existing homeowner and you have an existing problem, the city's here to help. That's what cities do, and that's our job.
Okay. With Webster Woods' value and ownership now in flux after a recent court decision, excuse me, what would you do as mayor to secure Newton's ownership and preserve the land as undeveloped, biodiverse open space for public enjoyment? Mark?
So look, I supported the acquisition of Webster Woods when we did it. I support it today. I think it was the right thing to do. I continue to believe it's the right thing to do. We're going to have a court case to fight out. We're going to need to look at that very carefully. I'm a lawyer, so I'm really happy to consult, and I've been a lawyer for a long time, so I'm happy to work with our legal team and understand their technical legal arguments. I'll support those, and I'll support our efforts to keep the land as much as we can.
Al, you're a lawyer too. What would you do?
I am also a lawyer. I would fight to keep this as open space. I'm a big proponent of open space. I think that makes part of Newton what it is, the Garden City. If we're all large developments and concrete, we're no longer the Garden City. So I think that every chance we have to preserve open space, we should keep and take.
To what degree do you think that Newton has imposed climate requirements that are too onerous? It's basically a question of how do we reach our aggressive climate goals, all good goals, without driving developers to other communities. And let's see, we're going to start with Al.
I think that actually some of our regulations are too tough. Keeping track of your carbon output for commercial buildings, I think is onerous. I think it's going to keep commercial development away from the city. And I think that we should step back a little. I don't think that we need to be at the forefront of this, especially where daily the technology changes. When you remember when big screen TVs first came out and they were like $20,000 and now you can get a big screen TV for $500? I think that we should let Cambridge lead the way and pay the $20,000, and when we find out what works and what doesn't, we should pay the $500.
Mark?
Look, climate change is really one of the critical issues we face as not only a city or a state, but as a country and indeed the world. So we have an obligation in this city to address climate change. I think for the most part, we've done a really good job in the city of doing that. We do need to be cognizant as we impose requirements of the financial burden of those requirements. That has to be factored in. We can't just pretend that something's going to cost more and say it doesn't matter what it costs. We need to be smart about that. But I'm not afraid to be a leader in addressing climate change, and we will continue to be a leader in addressing climate change if I'm elected mayor.
let's shift completely to something else. We've long had pockets of tension between north and south sides of the city and concern about race relations. And in the last couple of years, we've also seen a significant growth in anti-Semitism. Starting with you, Marc. What specifically would you do as mayor?
So look, I like to think I'm really very well positioned because of my personal life and how I approach things to do that. I'm first generation American, son of immigrants. I grew up here, went through the public schools, did all of my kids, worked for the public city of Newton in the rec department and Memorial School. So I know the south side of the city. I know the north side of the city. I've been in public office elected by the entire city for 20 years, and we are members of Temple Emmanuel. So I take issues of anti-Semitism very, very seriously. Look, the mayor has a bully pulpit here, okay? And as part of that bully pulpit, my job is to make it crystal clear that discrimination of any form is not okay in the city of Newton. And we will work very hard to send that message out to everyone. Every student, every resident of the city, no matter their religion, their race, their nationality, needs to feel safe and secure in our city. And as your mayor, I will lead in that effort.
Al, your thoughts? And not specifically about anti-Semitism, but the whole business of divisiveness in the city.
Well, I think that what we need to do is we need to bring the city together. We need to have open dialogue. We need to find out where the conflicts are. I don't understand why North and South Side have a problem with each other. I don't understand why people are anti-Semites. But I think that education and open dialogue is going to help, and I would push to have a dialogue to get that done.
Marc, some have criticized your unprecedented move to endorse candidates for city council and school committee as furthering divisiveness. How do you respond?
I have to strongly disagree with that. Throughout my political life, I haven't hesitated to endorse people. By the way, I note that Mayor Wu routinely endorses for the city council in Boston. Doesn't seem to have criticism for that. Look, the voters are free to disregard whom I've endorsed. That's fine. And I repeatedly promise that I will work collectively, collaboratively with whomever is elected. The day the election ends, whomever is elected, I work with them. And I'll tell you, I've demonstrated that. On the city council this year, 5 of my 7 committee chairs did not vote for me to be president. That's fine. I chose the best person for the job. I trust I've worked effectively and collaboratively with all of them. That's how I'll work with whomever the voters choose.
Al, how would you work collaboratively?
As a Republican in Newton, I've had to work collaboratively all of my life. You met me today. I'm not evil, am I? I'm a personable guy. I respect other people's differences, and I have my own opinions. And I would work with these people. Whoever's elected, I chose not to endorse people. I don't think that endorsing is wrong, but I don't want to have people feel that they may owe me something. And I think that that's the best way to run.
Okay, let's look back at your careers and experiences. Can you identify an area where in 2020 hindsight, you might have handled things differently? And what have you learned from what you actually did that you regret? Al, let's start with you and then Marc.
Gives me a chance to think through my many mistakes.
I think one of my biggest mistakes was I was the overnight manager at a hotel in Natick, and there was a fight in the lobby, and I stepped in to stop it. It was really intense, and I should have just called the police and shut the door to the office and waited for the police to arrive. But But that's probably one of the biggest mistakes I made.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Mark?
So look, I'm sure there's plenty of people in this audience who can think of lots of mistakes I've made, at least in my political career, and you're welcome to remind me about them afterwards. I do remember a night when I was at a city council meeting with the school committee, and we were talking about bus fees, and the school committee had voted that they should be approved. We were having a meeting there. Chair Larner at the time got up and talked and expressed the school committee's view. And I decided to chime in with my own personal views as to why they were a bad idea. And Ann Larner quite rightly chided me afterwards and said that wasn't the right thing to do. When you're presenting as a school committee, you have an obligation to present as the committee. I learned from my mistakes. That was a big one. And hopefully I don't do that kind of stuff again.
Well, sometime we'll have an hour to dig more deeply in all of this. The final question from me is, who among past mayors would be a model you'd like to emulate, and why? Mark?
I would go to the last 4 or 5 mayors and take something from each one of them. Teddy Mann, I think, was extraordinary in getting out there and being part of the community, standing at the front door of Temple, Michigan, Tefillah on Saturday mornings and acting as a greeter, genuinely relishing the job. I think Mayor Cohen brought a very cerebral approach to City Hall. He wasn't afraid to stand up for values that he believed in. Mayor Warren, I think, was exceptionally good at bringing energy and passing an initial override. I think he did a superb job there. And Mayor Fuller brings tremendous personal integrity and unbelievable hard work to the job. So I think there's a little bit of every one of them that I'd want to emulate.
Al, do you have a favorite?
I do. Mayor Teddy Mann, he's the reason that I've always wanted to be mayor. I love the way that he was in the community. As growing up in Newton, he was always a presence. And I believe that he did a wonderful job as a Republican working with the Democrats. And I plan on doing the same thing.
Great. Well, listen, we have come to the end of our time. And thanks to you both for stepping up to run for public office. It is harder now than it has ever been. You've both performed a public service in doing so. And as the clock and the timekeepers tell me, it's now time to move on to the city council races. So
Great.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Al.
Thank you for having us. Hey, thank you.
Appreciate it.
And wait, you didn't show up last night for the Vegas night.
Oh,
It was your
thank you.
$1,000 for your act.
Thank you so much.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you all. Appreciate it.